It's July, which means we're only a month away from Gen Con. And while I'm sure we'll get plenty of great board game announcements then, let's go over what's happening now in the world of tabletop for the week of July 6th, 2022. Zine Quest, which is a popular event on Kickstarter in which projects that are involving zines are made popular and pushed. Zines, if you don't know, are usually smaller RPGs, not your full tomes, but still have either interesting themes, ideas, or really unique mechanics. Now, this used to be held in February, but this year Kickstarter announced that they were planning to have it take place in August, along the same time as Gen Con. A lot of people found this to be troublesome because, as with anything on the internet, attention can only be split so much. And when you take the same month as the biggest board game convention in America, a lot of people are probably going to miss out on some of those zines that maybe they would have seen back in February. Now, because of this, there's been so much blowback. Apparently, they have now announced they see the problems and they're going to move it back to February starting next year. And that's where it's going to stay. When I first talked about this, think that February is the better move. I think it's good to sort of keep that area for the zines. You know, this area, Gen Con, is better for what happens at Gen Con because I'd be love to be corrected otherwise. I don't think a lot of the people who make these zines also advertise at Gen Con. Some do, but maybe only after they've been successful from Zine Quest. However, this will not be the smoothest transition. Remember how I mentioned how some people weren't happy about this? Well, some of them formed Zine Month. This is its own, I guess, crowdfunding service. It's just focused on zines that are also going to celebrate in February. So we're going to have to see how these two compete with each other. Will one absorb the other? Will they actually coexist perfectly? Not sure. The other curious thing I noticed was the person who made this decision at Kickstarter was Anya Combs, who now works at BackerKit. And recently I talked about how BackerKit is getting into making their own crowdfunding platform. So I'm now really curious to see what she brings to the table and whether it's going to cause as much controversy as this change did. Sticking with RPGs, we're getting used to hearing about Dungeons & Dragons breaking into popular media, be it in TV shows or being made into movies, but it seems now other RPGs are being considered. Alice is Missing has been picked up by Paramount to be made into a movie. If you don't know about it, Alice is Missing is about, well, Alice missing, and you play as friends, teenagers communicating each other solely through messaging apps, be it text messages, WhatsApp. It's all about sort of communicating the loss of control, trying to find out what's going on. A very interesting take on the role-playing genre. This is a really interesting RPG. I really want to try out. It's actually by Spencer Stark, who is actually now a producer on Critical Role, but he's made some other very interesting RPGs, including Kids on Brooms and Icarus in particular, where Icarus is all about the destruction of society, maybe hitting a bit too close to home right now. Now, the movie is said to be made by Paramount, and they said they're going to hand it off to the same people who did Twilight. I'm curious how far is it going to push into the whole text messaging narrative. I believe the movie, I think it was Searchers or Searching, had something of a similar narrative with someone missing and doing messages. And I wonder if that they're going to be that creative and sort of the entire movie will only be seen from a cell phone screen, so to speak. Very unlikely, unfortunately, considering this is picked up by Paramount. I just assume they're going to try to keep it a bit more mainstream and actually attach a story to it. Nothing wrong following characters that way, but I would have loved to see this as they go really weird with it. I've just noticed that we have a lot of RPG stories, so I guess it's the RPG episode. But unlike last story, in which we had an RPG joining the screen, we're going to take something from the screen and put it into an RPG. And it's definitely not one I expected. Over the last few years, many of us have been locked inside and we picked up new hobbies, being it DIY stuff, or for many people cooking, and in particular baking. And I am not surprised that many people who did choose that did so because they were watching the show The Great British Bake Off. This is a show that takes place in the UK, all about baking. I'm sure you've already heard of it, and if not, if you somehow have not, check it out. Now, apparently, we're going to get an RPG of it that's designed to be a bit lighter and last just over 2 hours. So it sounds like more of a single session kind of thing. The idea being you play as contestants, obviously with stats such as creativity or stiff upper lip, and you're going to go through different challenges. You're going to have to describe what you're making and how you're dealing with the challenge, and then you'll roll. If you roll well, you'll do fine, but roll too low, you're going to start building up worry points, which could lead to a bit of a meltdown. This is coming from Bardot, which is their first game into the RPGs. Also, sorry if I mispronounced your name. This is a very interesting one. It's not a property I would have listed off first as being made into an RPG, but that doesn't mean it's a bad choice. In fact, at this point, for me personally, when it comes to games and especially RPGs, if you tell me something I wasn't expecting, I'm more interested to try it out to see what you did. Because I think there are so many weird ideas out there, and with such a huge fan base as the Great British Bake Off has, I would love to see some of them come join us at the table. You don't have to bring any sweets or breads, but they're definitely appreciated. Now, this last story is not technically an RPG, but I feel it's still heavily connected to our previous stories. The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9, is now being made into a choose-your-own-adventure book. If you don't know, The Crew from Quest from Planet 9 is a cooperative game where you are playing tricks and trying to work together. I actually did a review recently about the sort of sequel-ish version and takes place under sea instead. If you want to check out what the core mechanics are like, they have a couple differences, but overall, same idea. Now, this book takes place after the story in the game, so technically they are linked, in which you are returning to 9, and there are going to be over 150 choices in it, so depending on the choice, I don't know if you actually make it to the planet 9. Do you start on the planet? Don't know that much. Now, the book is being written by Andrew Ulrich, and right now only has announcements for a German release, though I wouldn't be surprised with how popular The Crew in general was, that we won't be seeing a US release sometime in the future. Probably not this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if next Gen Con we're going to hear all about The Crew in English. Now let's get on to some game announcements. This first one, honestly, could have been its own story, and that's the new Arkham Horror card game expansion. The reason behind this is, first off, if you don't know, we are still in the new version in which instead of a bunch of little booster packs, we have 2 big boxes, one for the core investigators and then one for the actual campaign that usually is released a little bit later. This new one is titled The Scarlet Keys. Now, the character box includes some old faces as well as some new faces with some interesting backstories, but what I want to focus on is the campaign box. This one, it seems you're going to actually globe-trotting around the world, and instead of having a more linear path, it's going to be choosing different options where you want to go. And what I can only assume in true Lovecraft fan horror is depending on the choices you make, certain areas may open up or close off. And I really love this idea, and I think that they're able to get away with this because they were moved from the once a month or few months chapter pack to putting it all in one box. I think this is already showing to be a strong move on the part for the Arkham LCG, and I only wish they started earlier so I don't feel as guilty to buy the previous boxes for the sets I already have. That's not all we have. We got some other cool stuff. Lucky Duck has announced that it's going to be helping bring Tidal Blades Banner Festival. If you don't know, Tidal Blades is a series of games that just started. We have Chapter 1 already, which is a bit of a worker placement, but Chapter 2 is going to be a dungeon crawler. And each chapter is going to continue the story. This one's a bit more of a spin-off. You are in the same world during the Banner Festival. This one is a trick-taking game, but what's interesting is a lot of the cards aren't simply going to be just trying to win the tricks. The cards on them will print it whether this is the lowest card, highest card, middle, and give you certain rewards. Meaning you're not simply just trying to play cards and do a trick, but you may have to try to strategize, as some cards, for example, the higher cards will actually give more rewards if they're the smallest. So if you can trick everyone, so to speak, into playing their highest card and you play a relatively high card, you're going to get actually a bigger reward. So there's going to be a lot more strategy and not simply just winning or losing tricks, but how well you win or lose them. Then we've got the new Wingspan expansion. Everyone's going to be very excited about. This one is now for the continent of Asia. All we have is a picture to go by of one card. I happen to love this idea because it has something similar to one of my favorite cards in the base game, the Hummingbird, which tends to give everyone a resource and give you an extra one as well in addition. So I love this sort of group hug, but I get a little bit more strategy. I'm curious whether they're showing this card off just because this is one of their favorite pieces of art, or rather this is a theme going on in that set in which there's going to be a lot more maybe you help me, I help you kind of deal, or even helping the entire group, but I get a little bit more. I would love to see that and just see how crazy the game could get depending on more cards like that. Now, finally, this one I technically already talked about. I think it was last week, but we learned about the new version of Puerto Rico 1897. I didn't have anything to show you then, but now we have an official box art. I am really excited to try out this version. Now let's head over to the Kickstarter Pickstarter segment and see what games are planning to be built up with your help. It's no surprise that this should be my first pick. It's Amun-Re, the 20th anniversary edition. This is the new version of the game from Rainer Knizia, a auction game that is well loved. It obviously has an Egyptian theme, but this new version has, of course, some new components as well as new art from Vincent Dutre, who I actually love. I always love to see his work. But in addition, it actually has some new content, not just reworking of already existing material. These new expansions are designed by Rainer Knizia. There's a bunch of different ones with some that have some cool minis, but the one I think I'm most interested in would be the Assistant expansion, which allows you to play two-player version. Something that's always interesting when you take a game mechanic, something like auctions, that usually doesn't play well when you have less people. I'm always curious to see how designers get around that, and taking one of your games that are known for that and making it so it should fit there. I'm really excited to try it out. Now, this is a deluxe redesign, so this is going to be a bit on the pricier end. It's going to go for around $70 US, but this is already a well-established game. If you're worried about how it plays, I'm sure you can watch videos of the old one, let alone plenty of videos for the new edition as well. So check it out and see if this is one you think is worthy of your bid. Another one I had to talk about is the new Dice Throne one. This is a very popular series, but I love this one. It's very cute. It's Santa versus Krampus. Now, they do say that this will be delivered by this Christmas. That is a bold claim to make. I have rarely seen a Kickstarter say they deliver the date that they initially state. That said, let's actually focus on the theme. It is really cute, bringing both Santa and Krampus in together, and very much an obvious rivalry. One so much that I'm surprised Unmatched didn't already do it. Santa seems to have been designed to be a bit more simpler, which makes sense, while Krampus seems to be on the complex side. The other thing I want to point out is there is a rebalancing, actually, of a few heroes. You can buy in a small $10, I guess you call it an expansion. This is interesting to me in particular because first time I'm thinking about it is actually from the Tapestry game from Stonemaier. This idea of re-releasing some components in order to rebalance them. I guess actually technically we've seen this as some errata in cards, but it's nice to see them actually release new components that say the upgraded versions, be it if it's a rule change because maybe printed wrong, or such as when you have heroes and characters like this, you need to make them a little stronger. You can get Santa and Krampus to join your Dice Throne games for $35, but like I said, this is a very popular series, so there's higher pledge levels to add on whatever else you would desire. Trickdraw is an interesting card game that takes place in a magical Wild West. The idea behind this game is you're going to share a central deck, and when you draw cards in the deck, you have the option to play these cards face down on the table, which just give you 1 point, or face up, which will trigger some abilities and maybe give some more points. First person to have 11 points on the table wins. This seems pretty simple, but what seems to happen is you're going to be playing a bunch of different cards that will flip certain ones, flip certain downs, give them more points, give them much. It seems like it's going to have this really clever sort of quick but very interactive with other players. Maybe flip someone else's card, then they flip yours. And in addition, there are 3 special cards that if you collect 2 of them, you win regardless. So there's also going to be a bit of, not hot potato, but King of the Hill aspect with those 2 cards in terms of trying to gather them. And maybe if while everyone's fighting over those, you sneak over with your 11 points. Now, you can start by buying this for $20, but that gives you one deck that fits up to 5. You can actually buy a second deck. I think it's only $29, so discount. Get 2 decks together that allows up to 10 players. And honestly, I'm really curious to see how this plays on the higher player count, because depending on how interactive the cards are with other players, this could be a really clever, fun, more less party, I guess I want to say, like not like making silly noises, more interactive combaty that fits higher player counts, that also is not a 3-hour long game. Like I said, this is one I definitely more curious to try out if you have the larger player groups, because it's not very often we see games that work well above 4 or 5. Finally, we're looking at Batman the Arkham Asylum Files. This seems to be more of a puzzle in a box experience where you are following the story, what seems to be as actually Harley Quinn returning to Arkham Asylum, not as an inmate, but rather as her previous role, a therapist, and actually helping out the cops in trying to find out a mystery, which I can only assume involves the Joker. Now, the title does have Batman in there, so I'm guessing Batman will, of course, pop up here and there. The idea being you're going to be solving puzzles, building up the city, and using your phone for some AR effects to help you solve different puzzles and collect clues. This is an interesting idea, and it looks very well produced. And then I saw the price, and I can see why. Lowest pledge, it says you get the Arkham Files as well as episode 1 and a Kickstarter exclusive thing for $149. It seems to add a couple more episodes, each pledge usually upping about $100 or so. So I like the idea of this AR and puzzles. That's always something I'm interested in. I'm just really curious to see how much is actually included in the box. That said, this is Batman and Harley Quinn, both extremely popular characters right now. So if you like that kind of idea and you really enjoy puzzles, maybe this is one you should at least keep an eye on. Now, we're going to quickly go over some projects that are actually coming to an end in the next few days. So these are ones you definitely want to take a quick look at before it's too late. First off, we have Brett Walda. This one is on GameFound. This is a territory game in which you are fighting over England to be the next one crowned as the Brett Walda. We've got the Button Shy reprint campaign I told you about. A lot of cute games there. Steamforge's Epic Encounters Local Legends is ending, and remember, while you may see some minis on the cover, there is smaller pledge levels if you just are interested in the different taverns they designed. Beyond Humanity, another one I talked about earlier, is coming to a close. Definitely one to check out, and if you're unsure, you can watch our playthrough. Globetrotting looks like a really cute one, since it's always interesting when people add sort of a 3D aspect, but also a drawing aspect. So definitely something I think that's going to stand out on the table. All these projects are coming to an end, so check them out as soon as you can. And speaking of ending, this is the end of this week's news video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if any of these stories are of interest to you. Are you a zine creator, and what are your thoughts? Are you happy that Zine Quest is moving in February, or are you going to be joining Zine Month? And of course, what other things are you thinking should be adopted into an RPG? Is there another kicking show? Do you think it's time for Iron Chef to have its own RPG? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much. And if you think someone would be interested in one of these stories, please share it with them. And it'd be great if you could like and subscribe. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.